First thing first, we purchased a massive 6-meter sea container for storage. After checking several options, the container seemed like the most reliable choice. Fortunately, we found someone who could help with the transport, as many drivers were hesitant to risk coming onto our property during the winter. When the driver tried to leave, I finally understood why. He ended up staying a couple of hours longer. The container was placed right next to the forest, which is a good shelter and plenty of storage place. The next step was to build a fence around some of the land. The plan was something simple and cheap, just to give a slight protection for the building area in the future. I viewed several videos and created a plan. Calculated how many posts and how much fencing that I would need for the project. I found some used wooden posts that had been dismantled from a nearby construction site, and my neighbor Richard helped us with the transportation. I realized, without proper tools, I wouldn't be as fast or efficient as planned. I had some basics, but whenever something went on sale, it just ended up in the back of my car. I always had a good explanation to my wife why we exactly need that tool. The fence was quite challenging, and I did most of it on my own, since the weather was not really family friendly, and my wife often stayed at home with the kids. First, I peeled the bark off the wood and coated 1/3 of it with tar, as it seemed the best way to preserve the wood. I initially tried to apply the tar without removing the bark, but the brush kept stripping it off, so that approach didn't really work. I didn't have a stand, so this is what I came up with. I left them outside for a few more hours to let them dry before I stuck them up in the container for further drying. It was important to seal the wood properly to avoid rot.
One eternity later.
I was finally ready to start on the fence. The weather improved and my family spent more time on the land. It's always nice to have some helping hands around. The plan was to place a wooden post every 2.5 meters, along with a couple of gates, a main gate at the front and a smaller gate for access to the back of the land. I wasn't in rush at all. I started by digging 1-meter deep holes with just a shovel and successfully installed the corners and the main gate posts. Once the corners were set, I ran a string between them to ensure a straight line. Each corner also received a couple of side reinforcements to keep everything straight as the net is stretched. After a while, I switched the shovel to something, let's say, more professional. All the holes were drilled in just a few hours, even though the machine I rented broke down and I had to return to the shop for a replacement. Unexpected things like this can happen, but since the shop was only a 15-minute drive away, it wasn't too bad. I placed the fence post in each hole and made sure they were all secure and straight. The ground was wet, so it kinda felt like I was working with clay. But once it dried out, the posts were rock solid. It took me 2-3 days, but in the end, I could finally see the results of my work. After all the work was done, I never expected the hardest part to come. Stretching the net turned out to be the most challenging task. Once again, I was mostly working alone, with just 2 hands to help. The plan was to tie and nail down one of the sides of the net, while the other end was attached to a piece of wood, which I secured to my car with a cargo belt. I could either use the cargo belt or slightly move the car forward to stretch the net. At times, the terrain made it impossible to use the car, so let's just say, some very unique engineering solutions were created. I started with the back gate because it was much smaller and easier to make. I sanded down some wood and built a rectangular frame. I found some nice black hinges and picked up a dark brown paint to give it a polished look. My measurements were spot on, and I still had some net left to attach to the frame. This part of the project was simple, since the gate wasn't too large and it was easy to execute. Finally, the fence was finished, but soon we encountered some issues. My kids started getting bored on the land. We had to come up with a quick solution. We had some leftover wood, so we decided to build them a swing and also a sandpit. We had all the materials we needed, and there was a huge pile of sand nearby. I asked my neighbor if he could spare a couple of wheelbarrows of sand, and of course, he was happy to help us. I had a lot of cutting and digging to do. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, we found a tire at the edge of the forest, which we reused as a swing. After some hammering, voila, the sandpit was ready. Then we found more discarded items near the forest that we could reuse for the bottom of the sandpit. We had a fence, a playground, and a container, and even set up a little camp where we cooked our food and brewed our coffee. Honestly, it was time for a proper toilet, because I was getting tired of digging poop holes. In this part of the video, I take you through the process of building an old school outdoor toilet. I had some leftover wood from a previous gate project and a few pallets, which turned out to be a great starting point. I picked up some plywood and screws from the local store. The idea was to build a toilet on a pallet, making it easy to move around whenever needed. After merging a couple of pallets, the base was ready. Once the frame was ready, I attached the plywood on it and I gave the roof a slight angle so rainwater could drain off easily. For added durability, I covered the roof with shingles and used some tar underneath to make it waterproof. With the toilet structure done, still without doors, I leveled the ground and placed the pallet base on solid rocks. It was a bit heavy. I managed to get it into the final spot. A little leftover brown paint gave it that finishing touch, and it looked even better. It was time for a well-deserved break. We really enjoy cooking and eating outdoors, especially when you're surrounded by beautiful nature. With full bellies, we were ready to wrap up the project. Next, I measured the hole and cut out with a grinder. Since we didn't have electricity, I used a battery powder grinder to get the job done. Then we built the door and my daughter helped me paint it. While the paint dried, I dug a large hole beneath the toilet, cut out the bottom opening, and finished the rest of the interior. And just like that, we were done.